Man, every single time I look at kind of what's going on with the Nintendo Switch 2, things keep on coming together in interesting ways because now we have an update on what's happening with these Express SD cards and the launch for the Nintendo Switch 2. I think things are going to be a lot bigger than maybe even what people are expecting based off of some information that's coming out. We're going to go over another big title that just got some new footage and it looks incredible, and it seems like they're showcasing the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game. We've got updates on other titles as well, good and bad, so we're going to jump into everything right now at this point. Let's start off with the Lexar 1TB micro SD express cards. This is why I think the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be even bigger. Now, we know, at least in terms of projections and what some analysts are saying, they're talking about this launch could be the biggest launch of all time in video game history, beating out the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4 with over 4.5 million in the first month and a half or so. Now, the crazy thing is that if you go on Amazon and you try to look and see what's going on with these Express SD cards with the Nintendo Switch 2 that are required in order to use the Nintendo Switch 2 when it comes to the digital downloads or anything like that for your games, they're all sold out. The Lexar ones are sold out, and many of the other ones you cannot get. People are snapping up every single amount of these SD cards, from the 256 to the 512 to the 1TB. They're all snapping them up. These are the super fast ones as well so far that we do know. The Lexar ones are the fastest, so they're going to be able to transfer your data and get your games loaded up as fast as possible, at least right now. In the future, there might be other SD cards that are quicker than this one as new technology kind of comes out, like we saw with the Nintendo Switch 1, but the fact that these cards have been back ordered at this point and they don't even know when they're coming back. I look to see, hey, you know what, maybe I need to get one at this point. With 256, 512, 1TB all sold out, so that tells me people are super hyped and ecstatic for this launch, for the fact that you can't even get some of these SD cards. And I know that they're pumping these out. They definitely had a good stock of them considering the Nintendo Switch 2 was coming. They knew about that, obviously. Express, they knew that there was the Nintendo Switch 2. So I'm pretty sure that they had a big surplus of these SD cards, and it's hard to even find them. Now, you can go on some other stores and find them, but Amazon, one of the biggest retailers for people buying memory of all sorts, they don't even have them, and they've been sold out for days now at this point. That anticipation is building. People are excited and hyped and getting ready to bring over their whole library of games overall. But it also could mean that there's a lot of people that are probably thinking, yeah, with this game keycard situation that's going on, I'm going to have to download more of the newer games anyway on there, so I better get ready for that too. The Nintendo Switch 2 is stockpiling, or at least more like Nintendo is stockpiling units to get ready for this launch, especially with the looming threat of potential tariffs in the future. Nintendo is trying to get as many shipped over and in the US, in Canada, in different countries to be shipped out for this massive launch. What we've seen so far from the demand and the pre-orders are that people are incredibly excited for this system. We know in Japan it's pandemonium at this point, with multiple different retail chains essentially having to say, hey, look, we're going to sell these first to our most loyal customers who have spent the most. And we know that Nintendo has a registration of over 2.2 million people just on the My Nintendo store in Japan that wanted to buy the Nintendo Switch 2. So the pre-orders, that's just the My Nintendo store in Japan. That's not all the different locations when it comes to the retail stores in there, just My Nintendo. So we know that demand for the Nintendo Switch 2 is incredibly high. We also know that if you look at the pre-order allocation or stock that GameStop stores were posting in terms of what they would have for the Mario Kart World Bundle, in addition to the regular standard $450 Nintendo Switch 2, they were really high, especially compared to some of Nintendo's other bigger launches. Many stores back then, when I bought the Nintendo Wii in 2006, had around 12 to 20 units. We know now that many GameStop locations had up to 140 units, as low as around 30 to 40, but most places had 60, 70, 80. Pretty good stock for multiple different locations for GameStop. And it looks like there's going to be more stock at launch as well. Additional 60 plus units or so, depending on where you are and the foot traffic that comes into the store at GameStop. So it looks like this launch is going to be even bigger than maybe what some were expecting, considering all the different stuff that's happened with the Nintendo Switch 2 at this point when it comes to, if you want to look at it, bad PR or not. But I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing is that people actually know that the Nintendo Switch 2 is a new system. It's not a revision, it's not a remodel, it's not an attachment, it's not just something else, it's an actual new system. The marketing on that is very clear. Now, some of the other stuff when it comes to the game prices and all of that, that's not exactly clear because of the mass amounts of misinformation that YouTubers and other people have been spreading. However, there's also some blame to put on Nintendo for not making that incredibly clear when they first did things. Now, it was put up and people saw it, but at the same time, people misconstrued and there was obviously confusion when it comes down to it. But people know exactly the most important thing, that this isn't an attachment or a revision. It's an actual new system, a sequel to the Nintendo Switch 1, which is why I think that it was a genius and necessary move, looking at everything, that this is called the Nintendo Switch 2. If this was called the Nintendo Switch Super or Nintendo Switch Advance, people would intentionally try to confuse the public, like we've seen with multiple people trying to confuse people when it comes to the price of games, or just misinformation, or just not caring enough to even research. People would have done the same exact thing. So it's definitely good that we know at least that can't be confused, because it says 2 after the name. It's not a half, or it's not a super, or it's not an advance, or it's not any other type of thing to where you can try to confuse it. It's actually 2, so you know it's the next thing. So that was really smart, obviously, on Nintendo's part to get it done that way. But what's also really smart is for all those who are not subscribed to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy Nintendo Switch 2 content and RPG news. We're going to be ramping it up even more as we head toward the launch in June. Also, make sure you hit that like button and click that notification bell to get my vids as soon as they go up. Now, let's go ahead and jump into a very highly anticipated game, for me at least, and that is Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion. This is a follow-up to the 2018 released Daemon X Machina title that I covered in depth. Developers, or more like the publishers, were crazy copyright strike, and there was a whole scene with that. But it looks like they're cool this time because they're not doing that. I've covered this game a little bit before, and they're not doing the crazy claims on the trailers and all that. So I'm going to cover it, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I think that the most interesting thing with this, at least from my initial analysis based off of this new Combat Basics trailer, is that they're actually showcasing the Nintendo Switch 2 version of this game. And this version of the game is good, at least here in the West, because it's not going to do the key card stuff that people are really kind of pushing back against. This comes on a full 64 gigabyte cartridge. It looks awesome, looks like it plays awesome, and there were issues with the original game on the Nintendo Switch 1. Definitely was a solid game, but the problem was the frame rate at times overall, and just like the look of the game, sometimes low resolution. I'm not really sure exactly what it was running at, but it didn't necessarily look great in all aspects. Looks like they've completely bumped things up for the Nintendo Switch 2 using that added horsepower overall. But it is coming to the Xbox Series, it's coming to PC, and coming to PlayStation 5. But I think they wanted to make sure the Nintendo Switch 2 version was well done. So we've got a brand new Combat Basics video here, and they're kicking off a series of new gameplay systems introduction trailers. Now, in this video, you can combat your arsenal and use a variety of different tactics to take down enemies. They give you some stuff to where you can do more damage, and exactly how the combat works overall in the game. You've got a Titanic evolution, high octane armored action, and the interesting thing that people are noticing with this is that they actually scaled down the mechs, make them not as big and bulky as before, and make them a little bit more like humanoid, kind of moving around. So I do think that there is a little bit of a difference there, but I think it actually benefits the overall look of the game and the environments. I've also seen a number of people say this is very close looking to like Astral Chain, or maybe even Xenoblade Chronicles X. And it was so funny, when I first saw this trailer at the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, I thought Xenoblade Chronicles X. I thought some of the mechs and everything like that in terms of how they're moving and the different types of attacks that they have. But yeah, it looks great so far. And once again, if you look closely at some of the stuff here, you can see that the button prompts absolutely look like the Nintendo Switch Pro controller button prompts in terms of the font and how the X looks and everything. So it does seem like they are playing this game on the Nintendo Switch 2, because the font and the style is different for Xbox and for PlayStation for their X button. So this does seem like they're showcasing Nintendo Switch 2 all the way. And once again, we do have a confirmation here in the West that Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion is going to be fully playable on a 64GB cartridge. Now, there might be an update or other things in the future to add in content or to have, like, let's say, bug fixes or little things here and there, but they did confirm here in the West, the Western version, it is going to be on the full 64GB cartridge. Unfortunately, in Japan, it's going to be a key card game. However, if you get a region-free console in Japan, of course, you'll be able to play the Western version imported or anything like that. So I do think that this is definitely a good thing, and it's going to lead to boosted sales because they're actually letting us cover the game, 1, and 2, they actually have a full 64GB cartridge for this game. So that's some goodwill with the fans out there, and of course, physical collectors. Now, there's going to probably be tons of people who do not care, that are just going to buy the game digital and do not care at all, which is fine. I mean, the Nintendo Switch, when it comes to the system itself, obviously, digital is incredibly convenient since it's a portable system in addition to a home console. So if you just have all your games, you can just pick up your system and go without having to worry if you had a cartridge or not. But there's definitely people who play the Switch more like a home console and want to have that physical collection because they want to make sure that they don't have to worry about it being online or having to re-download. It can just play the game. And that's kind of how where I am. I like to have the game physical to where I can play that. So it's definitely good that they're doing a real physical version for Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion, and the game looks awesome as well. The customization, the new features, the mechs, everything's looking so much better than the original game. So I'm looking forward to this title. It is coming out on September 5th, so it's going to be here before you even know it. A little bit past their summer, it's going to be coming up. I'm looking forward to this game. It is looking fantastic. But we went from one game that's actually on a full 64GB cartridge to an announcement of a game that's really no surprise that it's not going to be on a real physical cartridge, and that's Star Wars Outlaws. That is going to be a key card game, but there is some at least good information with this because the gold edition does include the season pass content for $60. So you are getting the full experience of the game so far with the season pass content, all the updates, everything in it that they've done so far, all in the one download. Now, if you want to have that game key card, because the one big difference between a game key card and let's just say a full-on digital game is that a full-on digital game is going to be attached. It's going to be linked to your account. So really, that's what it all is. But a game key card, you can actually lend that out to someone else without using the system that Nintendo has for digital games, or you can sell it. So it does somewhat operate like a physical game because it's not tied to your account. You just download the game once you put the key card in there, and it's not linked to your account at all. So if you do still want to have the box and still want to have something physical at least, you can go with the key card. But for me, I'm not a big key card fan. I don't think I'm going to be buying too many of these, but it's interesting to see exactly how the public is going to buy these or not. Something tells me a lot of people won't care. They'll probably just go in there and buy it and download the game anyway, especially if you're used to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series where you have to install the physical games anyway, where before it used to just run off of the actual disc. Now you just have to install everything. Plus there are new games that are coming out that also are pretty much game key cards where they have limited data on the disc, even on PlayStation 5, like Indiana Jones, for example. So I do think some people aren't going to care, but for me, I'm kind of more of a actual physical, real physical type of person. So I'll probably just get like a review code from Ubisoft for this one and check it out to see exactly how it runs and everything, because Digital Foundry also stated this is an impossible port. Before we even know what's going on with the system and everything, they're already saying impossible port for this one. They've recently had to walk back a number of different things. But anyway, let's see if they walk back this one once they get it and they break down the footage. But yeah, we're going to have to wait and see exactly how it runs and it looks. It is a graphically intensive game. One of the best looking games on PlayStation and Xbox in the current gen. So we'll see how it runs and looks on the Nintendo Switch 2. But yeah, I do like the fact that they actually included the season pass in there for $60. It's not 70 or 80. So we can also dispel some of the myths out there that every single game is 70 or every single game is 80. No, that's not the case with the Nintendo Switch 2, at least not right now. So what do you guys think about Star Wars Outlaws when it comes down to it? This game also is going to be a pretty large game in terms of file size. It might go past that 64 gigabyte limit that Nintendo does have, so there could be that as well. Plus, the game didn't necessarily sell a lot on PlayStation and Xbox and PC. Ubisoft said that they were a little bit disappointed with the sales overall, but they did state that, hey, look, we're still going to port it over to the Nintendo Switch 2. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the changes to the Nintendo Switch Online app for Nintendo 64 titles. This was kind of already talked about, but Nintendo detailed it again, and I wanted to make sure that you guys know about this because there's some upgrades, but it's not clear if these upgrades are only going to be for the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the N64 app or if it's going to come to the Nintendo Switch 1. So essentially what's going to be happening here is that if you have the NSO plus expansion pack, you have the access to all the N64 classics on there that are pretty cool. I've played it myself, Pokemon, Puzzle League, and other titles. It's okay. I'm not a big N64 guy, but I do think it's pretty cool. But it's getting an upgrade overall. So there will be a CRT filter that's going to be added to the app to add kind of that retro feel to your games. There's also going to be a button remapping feature built in as well for each game's controls. So if you want to tweak things up, you can as well. Plus, there's going to be a rewind feature, which I do think for many people, you're going to need a rewind feature to beat some of these classic games overall, or just so it makes things convenient for you, just because, you know, how classic games kind of operate, auto saves and things like that weren't necessarily the norm back then. So having those built-in saves, having just a rewind feature so you don't have to constantly load up saves or anything like that is a good idea for retro apps, because retro apps, you just play just kind of casually, you're just playing for fun. So it makes sense to include that. And you know what? I'll be honest, I thought like they should have probably had that sooner, right? But maybe this is a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive type of thing because we don't know just right now if it's exclusive to the Switch 2 or not. They didn't necessarily say. So we will find out if that's the case coming up here. But the Nintendo Switch 2 launching pretty much a month away from the time that I'm recording this video. I'm super excited to see what happens here. But what are your thoughts when it comes to everything that we talked about, from the bigger, potentially than even expected launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 to Daemon X Machina, what's going on there, Star Wars Outlaws, and more? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.